It's a sequel!
When asked to get testimony for the first time from the only person who was actually at the scene of the crime and knew anything about it, Judge Goerner refused, saying it involves a confession of perjury. They weren't asking Scott to testify to a jury. They were asking Scott to talk to a judge. For the judge to decide only after hearing what Scott said and looking at the evidence whether it could be useful to a jury. But Judge Goerner stopped Scott from talking to Judge Goerner because they don't want to examine truth and risk exposing the government's lies. They only allow witnesses to say things that support and protect the government's lies. No witness who was actually at the scene of the crime testified at Mandi's trial. She was convicted based on jailhouse confession witnesses who never met her before, whose testimony contradicted a mountain of physical evidence, and who any honest judge knows is lying and intentionally hides that from the jury. If the jury believed the jailhouse confession witnesses, it's only because the judge herself encouraged a scam to mislead jurors about their reliability to help lie the state narrative. There are numerous obvious problems with the physical evidence looking at the transcripts and docket, such as CSI Smolarek saying 2 different numbers of gloves, and Officer Athaide saying the video timestamps were wrong and lying about when he made them. Mandi's lawyer didn't mention this, but a judge who cared about the truth, rather than getting what sadistic lying prosecutors want, had enough going on to do her job, find out truth, and get justice. Scott was actually at the scene and blamed for the evidence, and therefore can be examined to explain the evidence, to understand what happened and whether he's lying. The reason Scott lied at trial was to fit his story to evidence faked by police and by Prosecutor Stone himself, which left Scott no choice but to lie to fit the state's fake evidence, whether he wanted to or not. The state wants Scott to remain silent because his testimony is intertwined with the physical evidence. The problems with Scott's testimony arise from and would expose that it was faked. There was plenty in the record for a curious or diligent judge to find, to realize there was some truth that needed to be brought out. And the simple fact that Scott would have been the first witness actually at the scene to say anything about what Mandi did, so that a judge and prosecutor who cared about the truth would want to cross-examine Scott any time they can get him to not remain silent. But because Scott is the main actual witness of their fake evidence, and that is why Scott was forced to lie at trial, is the reason they don't want to give Scott another chance to speak when he is not put on the spot to deal with fake evidence defending himself at trial, in a new setting when he has no incentive either way. Prosecutor Stone used one of Judge's favorite lies, that Scott can't be believed because he is already serving life in prison, and so pays no price for confessing to a crime. Scott pays a greater price for testifying than most normal witnesses, whereas Stone himself let dangerous felons out of prison for telling stories that contradicted physical evidence, only because their stories fit his. People who pay no price for testifying are unreliable for it, but people who are let out of prison are reliable. They mislead with sophistry about who is reliable, whatever helps the state narrative. According to Imbler v. Pachtman and the Florida Supreme Court, the whole reason they let the government use jailhouse confession witnesses to torture the innocent with lies is because it's up to the jury, not Judge Goerner, to decide if their testimony is useful. According to lying judges, paying no price for testifying makes you too unreliable to testify, whereas being let out of prison as a reward for parroting the state narrative doesn't make you too unreliable. It's up to the jury to decide. The real reason Judge Goerner decided to let Mandi testify but not Scott is because scumbag Prosecutor Stone told the judge to let one testify but not the other. And the reason Stone did that is because he knew Mandi was going to tell lies which she has been encouraged and coerced to tell, which Stone wants her to tell to help keep her in prison, whereas Scott was telling something closer to the truth which better fits the physical evidence. If the judge spends even a moment looking at the physical evidence and has any interest in fixing the lies and inconsistencies in it, the real reason Mandi was allowed to testify and not Scott is not because Scott can't provide anything useful or because Scott is less reliable than the jailhouse confession witnesses used to convict Mandi, or than the perjuring cops who faked every piece of evidence which Goerner could have seen. The reason Judge Goerner decided to let Mandi testify and not Scott is not because Scott is less credible than jailhouse confession witnesses, or because someone in chains testifying about herself brings out the truth. It's because Jackson gave in to influence to testify the state narrative. Judge Goerner decided to let Jackson talk to her and not Scott, because witnesses are allowed to speak and are accepted as true, in proportion as they advance the state agenda.
Will you still have a song to sing when the razor boy comes and takes your fancy things?